He started out as Robin, but over the past 80 years, Dick Grayson has evolved in a way that very few other comic book characters have. From the way that he redefined comics in the Golden Age to the heroic haircut that he finally ditched in the 90s, here's the truth behind the evolution of Nightwing. Nightwing's origins start all the way back at the dawn of the Golden Age of comics and the explosion of new superheroes that hit the page after Superman debuted in 1938 and became a ridiculously profitable hit. Rather than trying to shoulder into the already crowded field of costumed superheroes, look up Stardust the Super Wizard sometime if you want to see how weird that side of things was getting. Bill Finger brought artist Bob Kane the idea of a costumed hero without superpowers who was a little darker than the others. The character was called Batman. You've probably heard of him. The thing is, the Batman who debuted in 1940 wasn't quite the pop culture icon that he'd become. Instead, the first few Batman stories are really just ripping off The Shadow, a popular pulp novel and radio character, but with pointy ears and a bat-winged cape instead of a slouch hat and a trench coat. Over the next few months, however, Finger, Kane, and artist Jerry Robinson would refine their character. If you need proof that they were just figuring things out as they went, consider that Batman didn't even have an origin story until Detective Comics issue 33, a full 6 months after he made his first appearance. It was in Detective Comics issue 38, however, that those creators added the final ingredient for making Batman the character we can still recognize today. On a cover that announced him as a sensational character find of 1940, which in retrospect is maybe the most accurate a comic book blurb has ever been, Robin was introduced to the world. Sidekicks have existed before Robin, but Dick Grayson, the circus acrobat turned boy vigilante, redefined the role. He was wildly popular with kids in the audience who already loved Batman and were excited about having a character their age who got to hang out with their favorite character and be his best friend. All things considered, it was a much more pleasant power fantasy than Batman himself, who watched his parents die in an alley. Sure, Robin's parents died too, but not only did he get a new dad, his new dad was Batman. No offense to the Flying Graysons, but that's almost always going to be an upgrade. Before long, the sidekick population exploded in the same way that superheroes had boomed after Superman. Marvel's original Human Torch teamed up with Toro a few months after Robin, giving readers the dubious image of a man on fire being accompanied into battle by a child who was also on fire. By the time Captain America debuted alongside Bucky Barnes in 1941, a kid's sidekick was virtually mandatory for the genre, but none of them could hold a candle to Robin's popularity. While he'd always be best known as the back half of Batman, and it was clear from the beginning that Robin was every bit as popular as his mentor. For proof, just look at the comics. It's nearly impossible to find a Batman story in the 40s or 50s where he wasn't hanging out with the boy Wonder. But Robin had plenty of solo stories, even headlining Star-Spangled Comics for 5 years. That means that if you do the math, Robin had more appearances in the Golden Age than Batman did. By the early 80s, he was even the star of DC's hottest book, The New Teen Titans, a revival of a series where a bunch of kids' sidekicks were thrown together for wacky adventures that are being reimagined as an X-Men-esque superhero soap opera. Finally, someone thought to ask the question that had been hanging over Grayson's head for at least a couple of decades by that point. If Dick Grayson can work just as well on his own, then does he need to be Robin? The answer, it turned out, was no. But that also led to another question. What's he going to be now? One of the most interesting things about Nightwing as a legacy is that it doesn't actually start with Batman. At least not in the way that you might think. Instead, Dick Grayson inherited that heroic identity from a somewhat unexpected place, Kal-El of Krypton, or as he's known to his co-workers over at the Daily Planet, Clark Kent.
Who are you?
A friend.
Oh, he's also Superman, but you probably knew that. What you might not know is that he has another heroic identity too. Back in 1963, Superman and Jimmy Olsen took a vacation to the shrunken Kryptonian city. Since Kandor replicated the conditions of Krypton, Superman didn't have any of his powers while he was there. But when he discovered that he and Jimmy still needed to fight some bottle crime, they created a pair of new identities inspired by their friends in Gotham City, Nightwing and Flamebird. In later versions of the story, Nightwing was a Kryptonian folk hero who was essentially that world's equivalent of Batman, and Dick learned about him when Superman told him the story. In both versions, the outcome was the same. After leaving behind the identity of Robin and paving the way for that role to be filled by other characters, establishing the idea that Robin was a legacy to be passed down rather than a static, permanent identity, Dick Grayson adopted the identity of Nightwing as his own, complete with a wild new costume. After he briefly took over for Batman when Bruce Wayne was recovering from the back injury he'd suffered at the hands of Bane, Dick Grayson finally took the step that, going forward, would define him as a character. He cut the mullet he'd been rocking since the late 80s. Seriously, look at this hair. It had to go. Oh, and he also got his own series, which would run for over 150 issues. In a lot of ways, the launch of Nightwing was when Dick Grayson became the standalone character he'd been on the verge of becoming since 1947. He hadn't been Robin for well over a decade at that point, and there had, in fact, been 2 other Robins in the intervening years, but he'd always been seen in the context of other characters, mainly as a member of the Titans. Now though, things were a little different. Dick was still a member of both the Batman family and the Titans, but it was at a remove that allowed him to flourish. He got his own city to protect in the form of Bloodhaven, a hilariously named exurb of Gotham that had all the crime but none of the vigilantes, and developed his own roster of enemies. He also got a streamlined, minimalist costume that stands as one of the greatest designs of the 90s, and still exists with a few minor alterations today. Nightwing isn't the only other identity that Dick Grayson adopted after leaving behind his 40-year career as Robin. In fact, the most surprising thing might be that he never went back to being Robin at all. Instead, Dick stepped up after Bruce Wayne was apparently killed in an event called Final Crisis. Needless to say, Bruce wasn't actually killed, and was instead sent back in time to caveman days before he clawed his way back through the time stream while being pursued by a techno-demonic hyper-adapter that was once summoned through a satanic ritual by Thomas Jefferson. You know, comic book stuff. Anyway, while all that was going on, Dick took on the identity of Batman, while Bruce's son Damian, who had been raised by the League of Assassins, became the new Robin. Dick and Damian's tenure inverted the classic dynamic of the duo, with Robin being the violent grump and Batman being more friendly and approachable. Once Bruce returned, Dick went through another career change. After his identity was revealed to the world, Dick signed up with a multinational secret intelligence agency called Spiral, where he went on sexy adventures that answered the question of what James Bond would be like if he lived in the same universe as, say, the Riddler. Eventually, however, he found his way back to Bloodhaven and the role of Nightwing, just in time to be shot in the head, get amnesia, and emerge as Rick Grayson, presumably because DC Comics had finally hit their breaking point after 80 years of jokes about his name. While Dick Grayson has been seen on the screen since the first Batman film serial in 1943, DC Universe's Titans marks the first time that his identity as Nightwing has ever been seen in a live-action project. That almost wasn't the case though. You might not remember it because it was overshadowed by all of Arnold's extremely cool ice puns.
All right, everyone, chill.
But part of the plot for 1997's Batman and Robin is built around Dick Grayson's frustration with his role as a sidekick and his desire to strike out on his own. That makes sense, considering that this particular version of Dick Grayson appears to have been adopted by Bruce Wayne in his mid-20s, but mostly it's an excuse for him to be tempted away by Poison Ivy. In the novelization, however, it's mentioned that Dick is constantly switching up his identity and costumes in an effort to find something new. And at one point, he suggests Nightwing as a potential code name before being shot down by Bruce. That didn't make it into the film, but Robin's infamously nippled costume there definitely borrows most of its elements from the Nightwing suit, replacing the previous movie's take on the contemporary 90s Robin costume. Also, while it wasn't live action, it's worth noting that Nightwing had been featured on TV shows before as well. When Batman the Animated Series was redesigned as a new Batman Adventures, Dick Grayson became Nightwing, complete with mullet, and the transition from Robin to Nightwing was even part of the Young Justice animated series as well. Nightwing has also been seen occasionally on Teen Titans Go, also with the mullet. We just can't get rid of that thing, can we? On DC Universe's Titans, Dick Grayson's arc as a character began with an attempt to move out of Batman's considerable shadow and past his role as Robin. And in the second season finale, he finally makes the move that he's been building to for the entire series. This time, however, he doesn't take his inspiration from Superman. Instead, the shift to Nightwing truly begins when Dick allows himself to be arrested, isolating himself from the rest of the Titans in an effort to keep the team away from the danger posed by their longtime arch-nemesis Deathstroke the Terminator. While he's locked up in Robin mired in a deep depression, he finds a purpose in helping out a couple of his cellmates, a pair of undocumented immigrants in danger of being deported and killed once they get home. From them, Dick hears about Al-Azul, a legendary figure from their village.
You know Al-Azul? In our village, Al-Azul's our hero. He lives between the moon and the stars, and in the time of greatest need, he flies down and saves you.
Realizing that they're talking about something that sounds awfully familiar to a nocturnal bird-themed vigilante, Dick decides that this is the new inspiration he needs to get back in the hero game, escaping from prison and getting a brand new cape-free costume. With that, his evolution into Nightwing is complete. But as longtime fans are no doubt wondering, only time will tell if this Dick Grayson will ever get the one true element that separates Robin from Nightwing, the sidekick from the hero, that sweet, sweet power mullet. Check out one of our newest videos right here, plus even more Looper videos about your favorite superheroes are coming soon. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the bell so you don't miss a single one.